We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.
Arena Radio.
Now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second. Surrender.
Obstructionism.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Welcome to Arena Radio, the battlefield of ideas. My name is Chris Pilie with lanternsofliberty.us. It's been quite a while since I actually recorded a podcast, and I wanted to actually record something tonight. Been having some pretty good conversations with some of my progressive, liberal, and conservative friends. Part of what has been keeping me away from the microphone is working on a new project called the battlefieldofideas.com, which is going to be a really fun project for a lot of people, and I think it's actually going to serve a good purpose. So I did want to mention that before we get underway here. Basically, what the site's going to do is it's going to bring people together and give a forum to everyone and for all their ideas, and the people that are actually able to come up with solutions and work together and come to some kind of agreement will actually be rewarding to them. And the site will actually calculate based on things that have been shared and the consensus that's built. Will reward them accordingly and give them props on the site. So, and granted, when I speak of consensus here, I'm not, advocating people from breaking from their ideology, but simply that there are gaps in between liberal policy, and I'm not mentioning progressives because I think that progressivism is anti-American, but I believe the liberals and conservatives alike, we can come together with some kind of agreements to some of the solutions to some of the problems that we have. So, but what I wanted to get to today was I wanted to talk about socialism and free enterprise. And often enough, socialism is accompanied with capitalism, which more or less is the way that Karl Marx put the two together. And it actually builds a false premise in the minds of many people. And it starts off the discussion in the wrong place, in my opinion. Free enterprise, different from capitalism, actually more embodies the economic system that is America's economic system, which individuals pursue their self-interest and the virtuous, the people that have the best ideas, they are the most innovative, are the ones that are rewarded. And so much they are rewarded that they are often able to hire people that maybe didn't have the ability to prosper in doing their own ventures. And that's the nature of free enterprise. It is success and failure. Now, granted, once you participate in the system and you've worked for someone else, and you succeeded working for someone else, you can go venture on yourself, and you can continue to do that as many times as you possibly would like. And you can fail every time. Many people do it. But what I wanted to really kind of hone in on here is the definitions of socialism and free enterprise. And I don't necessarily want to just kind of read some dictionary explanation of what it is or definition. I want to actually to go into detail and explain what socialism is and what it does. And I want to do the same with free enterprise, because the misconception is that, first of all, that we have a free enterprise system in the United States, which for the most part we do not. Just about every corner of our economic system is subsidized in one way or another by the federal government. So with that being said, our system is a socialist one. And of course, when I bring that up, a lot of people kind of, raise their eyebrows a little bit, and even some of the people on the left, they kind of get a little shocked because, we're, as conservatives, we are very proud of the American way of life, the American principles and so forth, and we're very afraid to admit that we are, in fact, a system that employs a lot of socialism. And I don't want to get into the discussion whether there's good socialism or bad socialism, because I think that overall socialism is failure. And the reason why socialism is failure is because socialism is what comes after failure. Because if you fail, you need someone else to take care of you. And regardless of what that is, regardless whether or not it is your house burning down and you need a fireman to come there and take care of it because you weren't able to, or you need welfare, regardless of which way you look at it, there is some sort of socialism that takes place in our economic system. Now, granted, socialism is accompanied with the power of government. And without government, there is no socialism. Because government is the mechanism that takes money from the so-called fortunate and redistributes it to the so-called unfortunate or the failures. And let's not kid ourselves when we talk about the unfortunate that they are failures. And of course, when you say that, there's people out there that are going to get offended by it. Well, sorry to offend you, but all human beings fail. And if we're not allowed to fail, then we will not know what it is to succeed. And we are experiencing that across the economic spectrum in this country, and it's evident everywhere. Perfect example is these banks that we bailed out in 2008. Barack Obama came into office at a time when our economy was failing due to failed government policy. And I'm not going to get into that today because I've actually discussed that on other podcasts. But overall, the reason why these banks failed is because of socialism, is because we were forcing banks to make loans that they were not able to make or was outside of their best interest. And not only that, but we made concessions to these banks in order for them to be able to do it. And in many cases, we rewarded these banks, the big banks mostly, because they were able to help out politicians. And it's evident on both sides of the aisle. So, we get a lot of finger pointing when we talk about, well, who caused it? Well, guess what? Government caused it. Regardless of what stripe or what color or, what political party was in charge, the federal government caused the problem. And that's really what needs to ring home here. And there's a lot of finger pointing, and the finger pointing really doesn't do much justice, except when you step back and take a look at it and see that the power of the federal government is what caused this, and the policies or failed policies is what caused it. So today I was having a discussion with some friends, and every time I have discussions, I always come across new people, and it's great to actually interact with new people and kind of get a different perspective on your own ideas as well as perspective of other people's ideas. It's actually very rewarding. I enjoy it. The battlefieldofIdeas.com is actually a part of that desire to continue that process. So in our conversation we had today, one of the things that I saw when I was reading through a friend of mine's on his wall, he's a liberal that I debate on occasion. We agree on some things, but for the most part, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. So, every time I get a free moment, I go and look on his wall and see if there's anything worth agreeing with or disagreeing with, and I do that on other people's pages, and you call it stalking, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, I enjoy the dialogue. And I noticed he had posted something, was talking about Walmart, and Walmart, first of all, is probably one of the best American success stories in history. And, of course, that gets a lot of the left, gets their panties in a bunch, because Walmart is the big evil corporation that comes into towns and puts all the moms and pops out of business. And, when people are unemployed, they give them cheap wages, and take advantage of them. And that's kind of the way that the left looks at Walmart. When in fact, Walmart actually provides a huge service to our society. And it depends on how you look at it. One of the problems that people have when they look at Walmart is they don't understand or don't appreciate the purpose of Walmart. And it's quite raw when you say it out loud. And conservatives, we kind of mush around it because we've been bludgeoned so much by the class warfare, dialectic materialism. That Walmart is actually a business that is in to make a profit. And it's that simple. There's not a business out there that goes into business without the desire to make about the individuals running it, without their desire to make their life better and to make a profit. There's not a single business out there that does it. It's all for self-interest. It's all, you can call it greed, if you will. But the reason why Walmart went into business was Sam Walton decided that he wanted to go out and make a profit. And he saw a way, he had a vision, and he was going to bring, his vision to the market and be successful. And in the process, he's made many, many, many millionaires. He's saved people millions of dollars on quality products at a low price. And, of course, quality is relative. And, obviously when we start talking about socialism, we talk about quantity versus quality. Some of you married folks out there, you may even hear that from your spouse about quality and quantity versus, intimate time with them. And it's a perfect example of the balance between, quality and quantity. And what Walmart does is it offers the most quality for the price at the largest demand. And that's why they're so successful. Companies like, Banana Republic, or companies like, Saks, Fifth Avenue, companies like, what's some of the other big companies out there? Basically, you get my point, is that they do make a good profit, but they're reaching out to a smaller demographic of people. Walmart has reached out to the widest market out there. And that's really important to understand, because that is basically what business is all about. And granted, big business comes with passion. I mean, people go into business because they have a passion about something, and granted, they have a desire to have something in their life that is fulfilling, but they don't leave their current day job or the security of their employer to go pursue a business without the idea of making their life better in some way, and they can't do it without the economic factor. And that's really what people on the far left hate about what they call capitalism. They don't like the fact that they're anchored to the economic system that we have. You listen to Bill Ayers. I always agree that you got to understand your opponents. And I look at people that are progressives, hard line socialist, communist. I see they're my opponent, and I listen to what they say, and I try to understand where they're coming from. Granted, I don't agree with what they're saying, but I understand where they're coming from. And when Bill Ayers says that he doesn't like capitalism or hates capitalism, the reason why he hates it is because it stands in the way of his utopian idea of being able to pursue what you desire without having to sacrifice in order to get it. And sacrifice comes with economics, because it's a law there. And the people like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn and people of the far left, they're lawless individuals. They don't like the constraints. They want to revolt against any kind type of law that restrains them from having what they desire. And the fact of the matter is you can't get around the laws of nature or the laws of economics, regardless of what you do. And for people that are more on the conservative side, and I'm speaking about true conservatives now, I'm not talking about pseudo-conservatives, people like Karl Rove that are, claim they're conservative, but they out there pushing big government policies. True conservatives understand that there is a sacrifice that has to be made in order to be able to live a fulfilling life. And the fulfilling life doesn't always, and for the most part, isn't attached to wealth. It's attached to virtue. It's attached to success. And that can come at any measure. It can come at any wealth bracket if you want to start categorizing people's wealth. You don't have to be a billionaire in order to be happy with the success that you've made. In fact, I'm far from that high income bracket, but I am very happy with the success that I've had with my business. So basically, this idea of free enterprise and socialism, it's constantly at odds with each other, rightfully so, because they're diametrically opposed in every way. But what needs to be discussed is the benefits of free enterprise. And the reason why socialism, first of all, is a slight necessity in our system. And when I say that, I'm talking about at the very minute government level that our founders intended. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But we got to be able to articulate, and I say we, conservatives that truly want to explain free enterprise, we got to get past no government or small government. You got to get past that, and you got to be able to articulate what free enterprise is and what free enterprise does and where the virtue lies. And I'm going to play some audio here in a few minutes. I think that really exemplifies where we need to be as conservatives in order to be able to better articulate our point. Our position, at least in my opinion, is self-evident, and there is no disputing it. It's been exercised throughout American history that it works, and the reason why in the recent history that it hasn't worked is not because it doesn't work. It's because the people that profess to be conservatives have failed to articulate it. Ronald Reagan wasn't a genius. He was simply able to recognize the laws of nature and the laws of economics with the help of many very smart minds, and he was able to lead the majority of Americans in the right way. And Republicans, if we are to get into political parties here, which I don't generally do, but if Republicans wish to truly hold up the crown, if you will, of conservatism, they really need to be able to articulate it. And there's nobody out there. I mean, John McCain doesn't articulate conservatism at all. At best, he's a liberal. Goober Graham doesn't articulate conservatism. Sadly, we're starting to see some of the Tea Party conservatives that are getting into power starting to tote that line that they believe that big government regulation is the answer. And there's some champions out there. I mean, Ted Cruz has really been doing a good job. I think Rand Paul has been doing a good job. But they're far from, at least right now, they're far from Ronald Reagan as far as being able to articulate conservatism. And regardless of whether you agree with it or not, if you're not a conservative, if you're a liberal listening, there is no one out there that was president of the United States or even a politician that was able to articulate conservatives better than Ronald Reagan. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to play, like I said a moment ago, I'm going to play some audio of people that are actually able to articulate it. I would even argue even better than Ronald Reagan, that weren't public servants. At least they weren't public servants in the eyes of the federal government. I do believe they served a great purpose to humanity and especially Americans. And I'm speaking of Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell. But so that's free enterprise. We can articulate free enterprise as simply the individual, a system that allows individuals to pursue their self-interests. And some people they pigeonholed it as greed, and you can call it greed or whatever. But people make decisions based on two things. They make their decisions based on fear or greed, and for the most part, greed or self-interest, which I'd rather call it, is what makes businesses successful. People that go into business with the fear of failure or an overbearing amount will fail. You have to have a certain sense of failure in order to succeed, because you have to know what to do and what not to do. And usually the experience of failure steers you in the right direction. So that's pretty much it as far as free enterprise. Now, socialism is a subsidy to failure. And to understand that, it's pretty simple. When someone fails and they need to be lifted up, they seek help from others, which generally comes in the form of charity or government help, which is socialism. None of the intentions of socialism or charity are bad. And that's one of the things that we have to get out of the way. I shouldn't say all. Most politicians that are looking to solve the ills of our country, and I'm speaking the ills, I'm talking about the misfortunes of individuals, have good intentions. And the reason why I say most is because I do believe there's a select few of these individuals that see that socialism is or at least the welfare system is a way to more or less put a huge burden on the economic system that we have, and also the tax system that we have, to more or less topple what we have in order to reinstate their system, their desired system, which would be a socialist or at the most extreme end of it, a communist system. And there's evidence of it everywhere. In fact, they teach it in a school called the Midwest Academy, and they teach the Cloward and Piven strategy. I'm sure some of you have heard of that before. I would implore you to look up a book. It's called Radical in Chief. I forgot the name of the guy. I think it was Stanley Kurtz from National Review Online. I think it's National Review or Weekly Standard. I think it's National Review. He wrote it and did some pretty impressive research on it. It's actually built on the basically he was seeking out is trying to understand some of Barack Obama's history, since there's so little of it. In the process of going through who he could be, because there's real no evidence there, he actually goes into all the people that he may have been surrounded by. And the case is not necessarily being built on who Barack Obama is, but rather who are the people that he's surrounded by. And generally that is a good possibility of who he is. And regardless, to me, Barack Obama is just one of the many. So even if the premise is false and Barack Obama is simply a drone to the far left, it's irregardless. It's the policies that these people are pushing that and their intentions. So back to what I said about the intentions of the socialist or intentions of the liberal or progressive. And even progressive, I hesitate to say progressive, because to me the progressives are truly people that are trying to push us over the cliff. And I say true progressives because some people label themselves as progressives. They're not necessarily progressives. They're just simply liberal. Sadly, those are the people that are drones to me, that are simply carrying the water for the progressives. Because if you read between the lines of all these policies, first of all, they're all failure. Because whenever you subsidize failure, you're going to get more of it. It's no different than fertilization. If you fertilize a free market system, you tend to get more free market. If you fertilize a socialist dependent system or a system built on dependency, you're going to get to more dependency. So what is good government? Because obviously you can't have a system without government, because it'd be just simple lawlessness. You have to have a system that empowers the majority of the citizenry to pursue their better interests and to keep as much of their property as possible. And I want to say property because it's more than just dollars. It has to do with property. And our system was built on the protection of private property. And what is really hard for socialists or progressives to digest is the boundaries that were put on our federal government in order to prevent a despot or despotism or even socialism or communism from overtaking our country. And granted, when our system was put into place, there wasn't technically any communism, but there was statism. Statism was actually described by Plato in Plato's Republic. It was also described by Thomas Hobbes in Leviathan, and also by what's the name of the name of the book's Utopia? Sir Thomas More. If you want to read a good book, read Mark Levin's Ameritopia. And basically that book will go over all those different people and exactly why they align the ideology of those people align themselves with Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto. So that ideology's been around forever. I would argue that the first impression of it in history was actually Egyptian culture and the enslavement of the Jews, and that the Jews were enslaved by Egyptians and were more or less living under the oppression of the pharaohs. You can call them dictators, pharaohs, whatever you want to call them. It was all basically the same thing. Now, granted, there's evidence that it was a pretty brutal regime. But how much different is that than a communist regime, say early communist China or even the Soviet Union under Stalin? So, the Israelites left Egypt for freedom, for liberty, and they followed their set of laws that were given to them by their higher power, by God, which were a list of laws based in property rights. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, or spouse, if you want to look at it in today's times. There's a reason why marriage includes the division of property. If there is a failure in the marriage, it's because that you become one. Your property becomes your spouse's property, and you become your property of your spouse as well as your spouse becomes your property. It's kind of, if you look at it in that way, it may sound a little bit materialistic, but that's basically what it is. That's where it came from. They are missing the point, and what's so amazing to me is these fools on television, they have spent their entire life making millions of dollars a year under the protection of the First Amendment, and they want to now, with that protection, take away somebody's right to the Second. You see how this all breaks down? Society breaks down with all this gibberish? Phony smiles? The phony smiles are what makes our society a civil one. We are the most civil society on the planet. Why? I would argue because of free enterprise. Now, the bigger the government gets, the less civil we get. The evidence is there. All you got to go do is look at the statistics. Look at the statistics that are more left-wing, big government, states, cities, to be specific, and look at the crime rate they have there. Why? Because people don't value property. Hell, I'm stealing from that guy over there. He's a rich dude. He's giving me free stuff. What's different from that than going and stealing something from my neighbor?
Arena Radio.
Check out Arena Radio on lanternsofliberty.us. So basically, kind of back to what we're saying about socialism, with the good intentions, socialism, more or less, like I said, it subsidizes failure. And there's evidence of it everywhere. There's perpetual, to me, it's almost like a virus in our system. And what's sad is there's so many people that are addicted to it that they can't get enough of it. And what happens is it builds the fear of these individuals that are addicted to it to actually go out and do something for themselves, to get off of it and support themselves. And if you think about it, for all of you that had the luxury of having, great parents and growing up in a pretty nice home when you were a child, and I say pretty nice, it's all relative. But if you had the luxury of having good, virtuous parents that really did care about bringing you up and molding you into the person that you became when you left their home, you understand that fear. You understand what it's like to go out on your own. It's pretty scary, and often it's for some people they're not able to get out of the nest. I know when I left and went to college, and I struggled to find my way and to try to find out what a true mature adult was. And like most kids do, and they go and they screw off in college and drink and all that stuff. Some of them don't go to college. Some people don't go to college. They just come right out of college or high school if they graduated, and they stumble. And there's nothing wrong with that. And some people, they fit into a place in their growth that they feel comfortable with. Some people, they find a job that doesn't pay very much, that is easy, and they're satisfied with that. Some people want to pursue something better, and constantly trying to push the boundaries and become extremely successful, whether it's monetary success or fame. Not saying whether it's good or not. I'm just simply saying that's what they do. And what socialism does is it more or less gives the individual that is partaking in the welfare, it gives that individual a false sense of security, because it eliminates the failure. It eliminates the stress of having to live on your own. And it's really a strange thing, because it's a part of human nature that we don't like. We don't like the idea that we have to fail. I have a son, and very often he does things that I don't appreciate or I don't approve of. And some of them may seem a little bit, maybe I'm a little hard on him. But I look at it as a parent, I look at it as that he needs to experience what it is to have pushback. And granted, I'm not overbearing. I don't beat him up about stupid stuff, but simple things like when he cuts the grass at the house. I don't just give him his allowance and then say, "All right, good," without any kind of accountability. I go out there and I walk the yard, make sure the yard looks good, make sure he did a good job. And the reason why I do that is because that's what he's going to face in the real world. So already, I am in a place where I'm trying to instill a good value system in my child at a very early age. And there's a lot of people that grow up in these perpetual welfare states that don't have that luxury. They don't have that mechanism that was installed by their parents. They are, nurtured by the federal government to simply, to me, to be a failure. And what's sad is that during the 60s and the 70s, when this so-called, war on poverty was waged by Lyndon Johnson, when all of that was going on, the intention was to lift these people up, to get rid of poverty. And it's actually done the opposite, because it wasn't a system built on virtue. It wasn't a system based on these people becoming successful and rewarding them with success. Instead, they rewarded their failures with more welfare. And there's a psychological aspect to this that I think that really doesn't ever get discussed. And of course, it's psychological and pure speculation. And to me, psychology, for the most part, is a bunch of hogwash. Because I think psychology is a science of imperfection. It's looking for the imperfections in people, and we're all imperfect. We all have a freaking disorder. I mean, how many times you watch television and you see something, you go, you know what, I got that. Damn it, we're all freaking human beings. We all have, issues with stomach problems and this and that. And granted, psychological issues, there are clinically proven issues with, schizophrenia and stuff like that. But there's a whole bunch of stuff out there, mostly pharmaceuticals, that are offered to people, for people that don't need it. Quite honestly. But anyway, I kind of steered off course there. The bottom line is that the psychology behind welfare is that you are nurturing people with other people's property. And I know that may not ring true until I explain it a little better. So let's say you're on welfare and you're sitting at home, and I'm not talking about the people that are incapable of working, whether it's a handicap or mental disorder or something of that nature. I'm talking about people that just are lazy and don't want to go anywhere. And it's very hard to determine who those people are because they're so good at riding under the radar. But let's just say you're a person that's on welfare and you're sitting there at home. You wake up late, go to bed late. You don't really have responsibilities because you're not answering to anything. You're not answering to a house note or electricity bill or a car note. So you're being given money or subsidies, whatever you want to call them, from somebody else. So automatically your value system is corrupted. And the reason why it's corrupted is because you're not held to the same standards as other people in nature are. And I'm going to say nature there because it's natural for us to have to try to survive. And if you take away the survival mechanism of human beings, they will suckle at the tit of government until somebody takes it out. It's that simple. It sounds kind of crude, but that's basically what it is. And so what happens is these people on welfare that they don't need it, that they're just not wanting to get off their butt and go get a job, is that they're more or less experiencing theft. And it's important to differentiate those people from the people that that are incapable of getting a job. And one of the things that we talk about compassion, and conservatives need to be more compassionate. I don't think there's a conservative out there that's against safety nets. And granted, you have your libertarians, and there's a mix. You have these Tea Party groups, 9/12 groups, and they have libertarians and conservatives alike. It's very easily to hate our welfare system, but there is room there for liberals and conservatives to come up with a system that doesn't reward failure, that actually does work for the people, and it's without politics. You can't have government without politics. That's not necessarily what I mean, but you can simply have a system that is a safety net, but does give people the, you have to give them some kind of motivation to get off of it. You have to have a term on the welfare. You have to push the baby bird out of the nest. If you let the baby bird stay in the nest, it's never going to fly. So, and I'm sure there's some kind of system that can go into place that can help this out. What we don't want is community organizations that get together and go throughout all the neighborhoods and go to working people and say, hey, look, I just want to let you know this is how you can get on welfare. We don't need to advertise how you can get a free Obama phone. We don't need to advertise in Mexico, or at least through the Mexican consulate, how America is great and we have this great welfare system. We don't want immigrants from other countries that can't support themselves. We don't. We don't need to have more people that we have to have as a burden on our society. We want immigrants, but we want immigrants that are going to come in there, are going to participate in our economic system and in a way that is virtuous and in a way that offers up innovation, that offers up efficiency in our system. These people that come over, we want them to have good ideas. We want them to be able to speak our language. So basically, what I want to do here is I want to listen to some audio. And, I kind of rambled on a little bit about socialism and free enterprise. But probably one of the most influential people in my life was Milton Friedman. And it was probably because of this clip, which is approximately 2 minutes and 24 seconds. And if you're conservative, you've probably seen this. But what it is Milton Friedman is on the Phil Donahue show. And Phil Donahue asks him a question about the imperfections of our so-called capitalist system or the market system. And I want you to really listen to, if you haven't heard this is going to be a treat. I want you to really hone in on what Milton Friedman says here, and we're going to expand a little bit. So here we go.
When you see around the globe the maldistribution of wealth, the desperate plight of millions of people in underdeveloped countries, when you see so few haves and so many have-nots, when you see the greed and the concentration of power within, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear, that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system.
But it seems to reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system.
And what does reward virtue? You think a communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us. Well, I don't even trust you to do that.
That is absolutely beautiful. And I mean, within 2 minutes and 24 seconds, Milton Friedman explains the difference between socialism and free enterprise, or what Phil Donahue here calls capitalism, more or less the same thing that Marx called it. And if you listen to what Donahue says, and I've listened to Donahue recently He comes on television every now and then, doing these little interviews here and there, and it still hasn't gotten out of that mindset. Even after this great lesson that he was given by Milton Friedman in 2 minutes and 24 seconds. But in the very beginning of this, Donahue starts off with the premise of greed and maldistribution of wealth. And he starts off with that premise. And that's kind of where I want to start in relation to what he had said. The maldistribution of wealth. I want you to think about that for a minute. And basically what he would rather have is a more proportionate distribution of wealth. And without disrupting an economic system, you cannot have that, because we're not all equal. If I get on the court with Kobe Bryant, he's going to whoop my ass in basketball. There's nothing I can do about it. Now, maybe he could give me 10 points in a game to 11 and I might beat him. But he has to redistribute opportunity in order for me to try to be equal. But even after doing that, there is no equality, because I'm still not as good as Kobe Bryant, regardless of what points he gives me. And that is what he's talking about in virtue. What rewards virtue? What is virtue? And I think that is the key to all of our issues. If we truly understand what is virtuous and what exemplifies virtue, we will understand what our problem is. But the problem that we have in this country is that we cannot come together and determine what is virtuous. We used to be able to determine what was virtuous. And of course, the left, the far left specifically, doesn't like what we used to call virtuous because it has to do with God. People that were good church-going people that had a family and, went out and made a living and had good, brought up their children, that isn't looked at as virtuous any longer. That is looked at as old-fashioned or mama or whatever you want to call it, whatever label you want to call it. Now the virtuous are the people that are able to completely destroy their lives with drugs, sex, whatever, and are able to come ahead with some tattoos and still be famous. The Charlie Sheens of the world. People that are able to be very talented, were more or less given everything they had because of their parents, and were able to, get fame very easily and almost completely ruin their lives with drugs and alcohol and things like that. And those are the people that are looked up because they were able to escape that. Not the people like, Bill Gates and those people. I mean, granted, there's people out there that think Bill Gates is great, but overall, society doesn't look. They look at Bill Gates as a nerd, And granted, I don't align myself with Bill Gates at all. He's done some great things. He's a brilliant person, but overall, he's he's got his head up his ass now with progressive policy. So virtue. So how is virtue rewarded? Well, Milton Friedman here is touching the very tip of the iceberg on how virtue is rewarded. And as I mentioned earlier, innovation, efficiency. Think about what the computer did for us. Think about what Windows did for us. Think about what the iPhone did for us. It made our life more efficient. It made us able to reach out to people that we wouldn't ordinarily do. What did Facebook do? Why is Facebook? What is so virtuous about Facebook? Now, we could talk all day about what's bad about Facebook. Okay, I'm not saying that Facebook is is a halo over the head. But what I'm trying to say is that why is it so great? What made Mark Zuckerberg one of the richest people in the world? He was able to bring a product to the market and offer a great service to the people. It's that simple. And that was virtuous to so many Americans. So many Americans, myself included, I was able to reach out to people that I never would have been able to reach out to without Facebook. We had cell phones, we had telephones, great. But more or less the icebreaker to people that I went to high school with was pictures that I saw that were posted of me and them in high school, and I kind of commented and broke out into this, next thing you know, I'm going to dinner with these people. I never would have went to dinner with a lot of my friends in high school without Facebook. So that is what Facebook offered. The iPhone offered me mobility. I was able to carry my entire life in a little bitty device that weighs less than a pound. I mean, that is amazing. That is why Apple is such a prosperous company. That's why they pay somebody I think it was somebody said like $250 million a day in taxes, because they make that much money that they can pay that much in taxes. Think about that. Think about the prosperity that I'm holding in my hand. I mean, and I'm holding an iPhone in my hand. That's why I'm... So what Milton Friedman here is saying is that what system in history, or he's even going further, he's saying there is no system in history that was able to become prosperous without free enterprise, was able to break the barriers of oppression without a free people that were able to be, operate through commerce. And there's evidence of it everywhere. Look at North Korea. North Korea is one of the most oppressive states in the world. And the reason why is because their people are not free to have commerce without the thumb of government on top of them. And granted, there isn't a big window into North Korea to see what goes on there, but it's pretty obvious. It's no secret what's going on over there. It's no secret what's going on the other side of the Great Wall over there in Asia. China, operates in a way where they running what they call now state capitalism, which more or less means it's crony capitalism. So in a system that's communist, okay, or what you would now maybe call pseudo-communism, there is no equality over there. There's still classes of people. In fact, there's more classes of people over there, or such a wide range between the classes over there than in this country. And the reason why is because of regulation, because of oppression from a all-powerful authoritarian government. Socialism. Socialism that is intended to offer and redistribute wealth in order to give freedom. And what's amazing about the idea of socialism, and what Phil Donahue seems to not understand here, as he sits there and pokes fun or picks at capitalism as some kind of materialistic world or way of life or economic system, he is saying that people can't be free without material wealth. Because the premise that he's offering here is that in order for people to be happy and equal, they have to have equal stuff. And that brings in dialectic materialism, what Karl Marx believed in. And he believed that in order to have utopia, or a communist worker's paradise, that you had to be able to redistribute wealth and eliminate classes. When in fact what he did was he created the most oppressive class system. So Milton Friedman mentions at the end of this, where are you going to find the angels? I believe that was actually James Madison that mentioned that. I don't know if it was James Madison or it was Alexander Hamilton. I think it was even mentioned in Federalist Papers. Anyway, the point is that where are you going to get the angels to run that system? Well, the idea of the Communist Manifesto, the idea of Leviathan, the idea of utopia, the idea of Plato's Republic was to have a system that was ruled by the elite. That you had an elite group of masterminds that would more or less determine what was right and what was wrong for the people. That way the people didn't have to worry about that. They would let the smart, educated, elitist group, the professors, if you will, of Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, and I'm saying that in an American sense, but it's all the same. Let those people determine what's best for us. Let the little intellectual elite in Washington, D.C., as Ronald Reagan called them, let them run our lives. Because we're incapable of being able to determine what kind of light bulb or what kind of toilet to buy. And that is where the fallacy is made. Because those little elite people in Washington, they are no different than us, the plebs, the people down on the bottom. They have self-interest just as we do. And they act, when they come on television, they come on MSNBC and Fox News, they act like they're all benevolent and they're out for everybody and just trying to make good for the people. When in fact, they became politicians because they desired something. Now, maybe some of them desired to be, to do the good for the people. Maybe some of them desired wealth, power. They desired something that was self-initiated. It was something within themselves that they determined that they needed, and they became a politician. And once they got past that barrier of an election, and they got the power in their hands, now they have to be angels in order to be able to provide the virtue to the people. The masterminds provide the virtue in a socialist system. The communist commissar that Milton Friedman mentioned, he, in a system that doesn't have free enterprise, is the one that offers virtue. I have a friend that I communicate actually now rarely through the internet, and I've met on one occasion, that used to be a propagandist for the communist Soviet Union. And he kind of saw through the facade of communism. He saw that it didn't work, but he had to work within the system. He wasn't free to go out and do what he wanted to do. He told me a story that he had the desire to create. He wanted to paint. He wanted to be an artist. He had the desire to express himself. And like all of us do, have this desire to express ourselves in one way or another, whether it's go get a job and do something, or if it's music or it's art. We all have the desire to create an image of ourselves so people can interpret and look at as our nature. Some people do it with a business. They create a business in their image. Some people paint paintings, music, talk radio, personality. We want to be individuals. That's our nature. That's our desire. Well, this guy, he wanted to do it. Oleg Aspastian. He's thepeoplescube.com. You need to check him out. It's pretty cool. But he wanted to be a painter. And the only way he could be a painter was to obviously do what? Go buy paint. Go buy a canvas so he can paint. Well, guess what? In the Soviet Union, the only way you could buy paint and a canvas is to go into the Union. You had to become a servant to the state in order to get your hands on those things, because they don't want you doing something freely. They don't want you painting without the authority telling you that you can paint. It's no different than wanting to be a plumber. You can't just go to the store and buy tools to be a plumber in the communist Soviet Union, the former communist Soviet Union. You couldn't just go buy tools and go fix your neighbor's property for $50, fix their toilet or their sink. You couldn't do that. Why? Because it, first of all, wasn't their property. It was the people's property. It was communal property. And if you were to go and get tools to go fix the neighbor, well, guess what? You don't have a license to do that. You have to have a license or be a part of the plumbers union in order to go fix the neighbor's toilet. Why? Because if you were going to go over there and fix that toilet, You're taking food out of a plumber in the plumber's union's mouth. You are infringing on the state and can go to prison. Think about that. That is communism. People have this vision as communism as like these, soldiers marching around and coming to the house and, living in a jail cell. No. Living in communism is living without private property. But guess what? Even in communism, even in the far reaches of the left wing of all ideology, the communist ideology, there was property. Why? Because we all covet. We all covet things that we work for. So when I was asking him questions, we went out to dinner one night, went to the Ritz-Carlton, had a couple drinks. I wanted to, really had a good time and just, kind of get everything on the table. I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand what the other side was like. I wanted to understand that if we don't turn this country around, where we're headed. So I asked him, I was like, did you have a car? Did you have an apartment? He's like, well, he said, and granted, this was years ago, so I'm kind of trying to operate through memory here, but he's like, we had an apartment, but, when I went to go get an apartment, I had to go on a waiting list to get an apartment. And, it was often you'd wait a long time. Cars, not everybody had cars. Most people had bikes. So whenever I hear all these bike trails and all this stuff, I roll my eyes thinking, good Lord. People desire to do this, and in communist China and in the communist Soviet Union, you were lucky to be able to get a vehicle. And for the most part, the government officials are the one who get the vehicle because they were looked at as the elite. Those are the ones that had to get to work on time because those are the ones that were going to rule over everybody. They were the benevolent leaders that were angels that weren't going to take advantage of the proletariat. When in fact, what he told me was that a lot of times if you knew somebody, like if you had a buddy that his dad was in the government, he was in the communist government, that he could possibly work something out to get you something. So it was like living in the mob. And that's exactly what communism is. It's because there's the operation within ourselves to seek out self-interest doesn't go away. Regardless of what our ideology is, regardless of what we believe. That's what infuriates me about the left that always talks about greed. Because guess what? Greed, as Mr. Phil Donahue here said, he acts like he doesn't operate in greed. When he gets up every day and makes whatever he was making back then, probably a very good salary, he didn't do that without some type of greed or some type of desire for self-interest. He doesn't live in a nice house and drive a nice car because he didn't have that desire. It's no different than the communist commissar having the same self-interest to do better for himself or his family. And that's all what we want to do as Americans. We want what's best for us. We want what's best for our family. And there's no other system that is better than a system that harnesses itself on that motivation.
If it becomes wayward, who shall control it? If it becomes unjust, who shall trust it? As sentinels of the country's watchtower, I beseech you to watch and guard with sleepless dread that corporation which can make all property and rights, all states and people, and all liberty and hope its playthings in an hour and its victims forever.